There's a crack out there right now in your driveway, your garage floor, maybe right under the porch step, and you've been walking past it for months, telling yourself you'll call somebody about it one of these days. I want to tell you something before you make that call. That crack, the one you keep stepping over, you can probably fix it yourself this weekend for about $5, not $300. 5. I'm Robert. I'm 102 years old, and I have poured, patched, and cussed at more concrete than most contractors will touch in 3 lifetimes. I grew up on a farm before anybody had a name for curb appeal, back when a cracked walk just meant you got the trowel down from the shed and you fixed it yourself because there wasn't any other option. Nobody was driving out from town for a $50 service call over a hairline crack in 1938. You fixed your own concrete or you tripped on it for the rest of your life. Now, before I tell you how to do this, and I am going to tell you step by step, I want you to sit with something my father used to say. He said a crack in the concrete is a lot like a crack in a friendship. You can ignore it. Nothing happens right away. But the water gets in. It always gets in. And once the water's in there, it isn't a small thing anymore. It's a big thing wearing a small thing's clothes. I remember him kneeling right outside our kitchen door one morning, must have been May, the ground was still cool from the night, with an old chisel in his hand, the wood handle worn smooth and dark from years of his palm. There was a crack running along the walk, maybe 1.5 feet long, and to my eye it looked like nothing. Just a line. He wouldn't touch it, though. Not yet. He ran his thumbnail along the length of it first, slow, like he was reading something written in a language only he understood. Then he pressed the tip of the chisel into it and gave it one light tap. "Look here," he said. "This one's talking to you. It's just shrinkage. Nothing's moved." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. And that's really the whole secret right there, before we ever get to bags of mix or trowels or any of it. Before you fix a crack, you have to know what kind of crack you're looking at. Get that wrong, and you can waste your $5, or worse. You can cover up something that needed a real look from a real professional. See, there's 2 kinds of cracks in this world, and they don't behave the same, and they surely don't cost the same to deal with. There's the crack that's just concrete doing what concrete does, shrinking a hair as it cures, flexing a hair with the seasons. And then there's the crack that's telling you something underneath your house is moving. Those are not the same animal, and treating one like the other is how folks get themselves in trouble. Here's a number worth remembering: 1/8 of an inch. That's about the width of a dime standing on its edge. If a crack is thinner than that, hairline, the kind you'd almost miss unless the light's hitting it right, and it isn't growing, isn't shifting, isn't weeping water after a rain, that crack is almost always cosmetic. It happened while the slab was curing, or it happened over a hot summer and a cold winter working the concrete back and forth for a few years. That crack you can fix yourself, and I mean that plainly, no hedging. Now a crack wider than 1/4 inch, that's about the thickness of 2 nickels stacked, one that's getting wider month over month, or where one side sits higher than the other like a little step, or one that seeps water even when it hasn't rained in a week. That crack is in the foundation of a different conversation. That one you don't patch and forget. That one you get a set of eyes on. A real foundation man, not a fellow with a truck full of caulk tubes. I'll come back to that, because I don't want anybody watching this thinking I'm telling you to seal up a warning sign. I'm not. But most of what's out in your driveway, your garage floor, your patio, most of it is the first kind, the quiet kind. And that's good news, because that's the kind $5 in an afternoon can handle just fine. Let me tell you what's actually in that bag before we go any further, because I think it helps to know what you're holding. An 80-pound bag of concrete mix, the kind you'll find on a pallet at any hardware store, runs somewhere around $5 to $10. That same bag, once it's mixed, poured, and given about 28 days to cure properly, reaches something like 4,000 pounds per square inch of strength. That's not a soft patch. That's real strength, the same stuff your sidewalk was made from to begin with. For the smaller jobs, A hairline crack you don't need a whole bag for. There's tube fillers in hydraulic cement, and those run somewhere between $10 and $30. Now compare that to what a crew charges to come fix the same crack. I've seen figures anywhere from $250 on the low end up past $800 for a single crack, and if you start talking about a whole slab or something structural, it climbs into the thousands quick. The national average for a full concrete repair job, from what I understand, sits around $1,890. $1,890 for something you might be able to do yourself for the price of a decent dinner out. Now, before you go grab a trowel, there's something I have to say plainly because I've seen folks get careless with this and regret it. Dry concrete powder is not something to breathe or to leave sitting on bare skin. It'll irritate your eyes something fierce if it gets in 'em, and once it's wet it gets worse, not better. The moisture activates it, and it can burn if you leave it on your skin too long. Wear gloves. Wear a mask when you're mixing the dry powder, especially indoors in a garage without much airflow. Open the door, get a fan going if you've got one. This isn't a step to skip because you're in a hurry. My hands have felt what happens when you rush this part, and it isn't pleasant. All right, here's where we get into it, the part where you actually fix the thing. First thing you do before any mix touches that crack is you clean it out, and I mean really clean it, right down to the bottom, not just brushed off on top. Loose bits of old concrete, dirt that's settled in there over the years, sometimes even a little root that's crept in from a nearby shrub, all of that has to come out. A stiff wire brush works. So does an old flathead screwdriver or a beat-up chisel, same kind my father had. Get down in there and scrape, then rinse it. A garden hose does fine, a pressure washer does it faster, and here's the part people rush past. Let it dry completely before you fill it. A crack that's still damp inside will spit your patch right back out at you a few weeks later, and then you're back where you started, except now you're out $5 on a Saturday. Now here's the part that sounds backwards, and I remember thinking it was foolishness the first time somebody showed me. If the crack is thin, you don't just pour filler into a straight little slot. You widen it a touch with a chisel, but not straight down. You angle it so the bottom of the crack is a little wider than the top. Folks call it a keyhole cut, on account of it looking something like an old-fashioned keyhole if you look at it from the side. Wider at the bottom, narrower up top. Now why in the world would you make the hole bigger before you fill it? Seems like you're making the job harder, not easier. But think about it this way. Once your patch material sets up down in that wider bottom section, it can't just pull straight up and out anymore. It's locked in same as a wedge. You'd have to break the concrete around it to get it loose. It becomes part of the slab instead of just sitting on top of it. My father called it giving the patch something to hold on to. Simple as that. For those hairline cosmetic cracks, the shrinkage kind, this is usually as involved as it needs to get. Clean it, key it a touch, and fill it. For a little wider crack, 1/4 inch or so, but still shallow and not moving, that 80-pound bag mix worked into a thick paste, pressed down into the crack with a pointing trowel or even the edge of a putty knife does the job. Pack it in tight. Don't leave air pockets. That's another spot where a patch fails early, some little bubble in there that the cold gets into come January and splits it open again. Now here's something I want to be honest about, because there's a difference between hydraulic cement and what a professional calls epoxy injection. And I don't want you thinking they're the same thing wearing different price tags. Hydraulic cement, that's the fast-setting stuff, sometimes sold in a tub, expands a little as it cures, good for stopping a small leak or filling a gap quick. It seals the surface of a crack. That's what it's built to do. It does not fuse itself into the concrete on either side the way a true structural repair does. If there's ever any real movement in that slab, settling, freeze-thaw, shifting, anything with some force behind it, hydraulic cement can crack right back open. I've had a fellow tell me his hydraulic patch held for 2 winters and then let go the third right where he'd filled it. That's just the nature of the material. It's a patch, not a weld. The epoxy injection is a different animal entirely. That's what the professionals use when there's real structural concern, when a crack needs to be bonded back together, not just covered over. It costs more because it's doing more. For your average driveway crack, your average garage floor crack, the kind we've been talking about this whole time, you don't need that. You need the $5 bag and a little patience. But if you ever find yourself dealing with a crack that's moving, that's wide, that's in a load-bearing wall, that's when you spend the money on the real thing and you don't try to save $5 on a problem that needs $500. Once you've got your patch in, whichever kind fits your crack, you're not done. This is where folks get impatient and undo all their good work in one afternoon. You leave that patch alone. No walking on it, no parking a car over it, nothing for at least 24 hours, and closer to 48 is better if you can manage it. Keep it dry, too, if rain's coming. Throw a tarp over it. I've seen a man patch a walkway on a Friday, then get rained on Saturday night, and by Sunday morning half his work had washed soft again. Give it the time it's asking for. Concrete doesn't care that you're in a hurry. Now, nobody makes money telling you a $5 bag of mix does the same job a $300 service call does. Think about that for a second. There's not much profit in a man fixing his own driveway on a Saturday afternoon, so it doesn't surprise me none that this kind of thing isn't exactly advertised on the side of a truck. Anyway, let me get back to it. I do want to circle back to the crack you should not touch yourself, because I'd feel wrong sending you off with a trowel and not saying this plainly. If you've got a crack in a basement wall or in a foundation wall anywhere on the house, and it's wider than that 1/4 inch mark I gave you earlier, especially if it's growing, if one side has shifted higher or lower than the other, or if water's finding its way through it even on a dry week, do not patch that and call it done. There's not a cosmetic crack. That's a house telling you something's moving underneath it, and covering it with hydraulic cement just hides the symptom while the real cause keeps working. A crack like that needs a person who knows foundations, and it needs it before it gets worse, not after. So that's the honest line I'll draw for you. Hairline shallow, not growing, not weeping water, that's yours to fix, and it'll cost you a few dollars in an afternoon. Wide growing, shifted, or wet, that belongs to a professional, and paying for that one is money well spent, not money wasted. My father, by the way, he never did let me touch that walkway crack myself that day, made me watch first, said I could do the next one. There were plenty of next ones over the years, and by the time I was grown I could read a crack about as fast as he could just by the way it sat in the light. I think about that a fair amount now, more than you'd expect for something so small. There's a particular kind of confidence that comes from knowing you don't need to call somebody every time something in your house shows a little wear. It isn't about the $5, not really, though the $5 is nice. It's about not handing over a piece of your own capability the moment something looks a little broken. The moment you decide a thing is too hard for your own 2 hands, you've handed over a little piece of your independence, along with your money. Now, some of you are sitting there with a garage floor that's got 3 or 4 of these little cracks running through it, maybe from a few different summers. You don't need to fix all of them the same day if that feels like too much. Pick the worst one. The one you trip on, the one that's letting the most water sit and freeze come winter. Fix that one first. See how it holds. Once you've done one, the rest go quicker because you'll know what you're looking at before you even kneel down. I'll tell you this too, none of what I've shared with you today is anything new. This is the kind of thing every man who ever owned a piece of property used to just know, the same way he knew how to change a fan belt or patch a roof shingle. It wasn't special knowledge, it was just knowledge. Somewhere along the way, a lot of that got set down and forgotten, not because it stopped working, but because it was easier to just make a phone call and let somebody else worry about it. The knowledge didn't go anywhere, though. It's still here. I'm just passing it back along. So here's what I want you to do. Go take a look at that crack you've been walking past. Really look at it. Get down close. Run your thumb along it the way my father did. Figure out which kind you're dealing with. And then tell me in the comments where it is. Is it the driveway, the garage floor, that step out back nobody's touched in years? And how long has it been sitting there waiting on you? Next time I want to talk about that other kind of crack, the one in a basement wall, the one that isn't yours to patch. I'll tell you exactly what to look for and exactly what questions to ask a professional before you let him anywhere near your foundation, so nobody talks you into more work than you actually need. For now, go fix that little one. It won't take you long and you'll feel a good deal better walking past it once it's whole again. There's one more thing I ought to mention before I let you go because I nearly forgot it myself, and it's the kind of thing that trips people up after they've done everything else right. Once that patch is cured, give it that full week if you can, not just the first day or two. You'll notice it doesn't quite match the rest of the slab. It's grayer or lighter, sometimes almost white if you used a fresh bag against old, weathered concrete. That bothered me the first few times I did it, made the walk look patched instead of fixed, like a shirt with a visible mend in it. My mother used to say a mended thing should look like it was never torn, and for a while I thought concrete just couldn't do that. Turns out you can blend it some. A little concrete stain, the kind that comes in a small can for maybe $8 or $10, rubbed on with an old rag once the patch is fully cured, will take that stark whiteness down and let it sit closer to the color of the surrounding slab. It won't be invisible, but it won't jump out at you from the porch steps either. That's a small step, and plenty of folks skip it, and there's nothing wrong with skipping it if you don't care about the look. I only bring it up because I know some of you are the type who'll fix the crack and then stare at that pale patch every time you walk out to get the mail, and that's its own kind of aggravation. Timing matters more than people think, too. I wouldn't recommend doing any of this when it's much below 40 degrees outside, or when it's blazing hot either, anything over 90, and that patch dries too fast on the surface before it's had a chance to cure properly underneath. And a fast cure is a weak cure. Spring or fall, cool morning, that's your window. My father always did his patching in April, and I never once asked him why until I was old enough to have cracks of my own to fix. Then it just made sense. I'll tell you one more thing and then I really will let this one rest. A neighbor of mine, Earl, lived 2 doors down for the better part of 20 years, had a crack in his driveway he swore up and down needed a whole new slab poured, $4,000, maybe more, some fella had told him. Turned out it was a hairline crack, dry, not moving, sitting there since the driveway was poured back in the 70s. Cost him a bag of mix on a Saturday morning. He still brings it up sometimes, half annoyed at himself for almost paying $4,000 for what a $5 bag handled just fine. That's really the whole of it. A crack isn't always a crisis. Sometimes it's just concrete doing what concrete does, and all it's asking for is a little attention before winter gets its teeth into it. So go on. Go look at that crack. Tell me down in the comments what you find, and I'll see you next time when we talk about the ones you leave to the professionals.